Hello! We are having the exciting pleasure here today in having the first public office hours with State Change and NoCode ProCode. So with Ray and me, and some of you probably already know about Ray because he has his State Change community where he's helping people solve all kinds of, bugs and troubleshoot, their hardest 10% when it comes to Xano, when it comes to WeWeb, when it comes to really everything. And also now recently vibe coding and AI enhanced coding like Cursor. And they're doing amazing stuff also with MCPs and all that. So it's definitely worth checking it out. But he has his community and I have my community where we'll do, my focus is more like us making buttons look nice and work. And he's more like, let's actually get them to work, But we had the idea, how about we'll put this together and we'll turn this into content and we'll provide great value for all of you, on YouTube here, right? And if you got any questions for any of us, you can just put them in the chat. But I think there was already plenty of an introduction. Ray, how are you doing today? It's great having you here.
Doing great, man. It has been a pretty good week so far, I said on Tuesday.
Wonderful. So how do you want to start this? Because we've never done this before, or at least not in this format, right? Because right now we are live on YouTube. Actually, let me check on the YouTube app if we're actually live. Because it looks live for me. Let's see. Actually, I can confirm. We are live. We are live. So we are live. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we are live. I'm live. That's cool. So how do we want to start this?
Yeah, well, I guess I figure there are, three ways we can go here, right? The first is what's the news of the week in terms of being able to address, trends or the ideas that have been, coming out since last time we got to do this. We do this. We've been doing this conversation every 2 weeks now for the last couple of months, and it's been pretty neat. We're trying a live thing today. Yeah. The second is going to be I might propose things that have come out of our communities, right? What are those, trend lines? Because I think that will give people a sense of like the kinds of conversations that we're having, but also sort of, feed the loop back around. Like what does that mean in terms of our insight as to like what the news is going to be next week, right? Because we're seeing the leading edge of it in the questions and the conversations we've been having. Yeah. And then the third would be if there is anybody watching, or at least anybody watching live, if there are questions that are coming in the door.
People are watching so far.
All right. 3 people are watching, including you on your phone?
2.
Okay. Okay. So, but maybe we should start with like what the news of the week is. I mean, and let me try putting it a slightly different way. What do you know today that you didn't know when you and I talked 2 weeks ago?
Okay. It's going to be a spicy one. Your front end is replaceable, your back end is critical. That's what I didn't know a few weeks ago.
Yep. That is a good a good observation. That I think a lot of
that's where all your business logic runs. Yep. That's all where most of your IP will run. That's where your business actually lives. It doesn't matter if you're actually going to use WeWeb, if you're going to use Toddle, if you're going to use Whist. And it's something I just recently learned a few days ago. It doesn't matter if you learn, Whist, WeWeb, Webflow, whatever hacky JavaScript framework you're using, Next.js, Lovable, AI, Cursor. It does not matter at all because that is not where your IP is. That's not where the value of your business is stored. It's never in the UI. It's never on the interface. Unless you're going to build something like Canva, maybe, right? That could make sense. But for most of the SaaS that we're seeing built, your secret sauce is on the back end. It's not on the front end. And therefore, it does not really matter what front-end tool you're using. That's what I learned. You can do the same thing that you can do in Toddle, you can do in WeWeb, and the same thing that you can do in WeWeb, you can do in Whist, and what you can do in Whist, you can do in Lovable. There's just all different variations on how they like to go about things, and just all different kinds of mental models. And some mental models work better for you and some work better for me and whatever. But at the end of the day, it does not matter, because the core of our business runs on the back end. That is the important part. And I think we should spend less time trying to worry about anything that goes on the front end, and more time making sure that the architecture that we're building on the back end actually makes sense and is something that is actually valid for our customers when they, buy our software.
I think there's a lot to be said that. I think that it's something where we put enough pressure on the idea that it starts to fall apart. I do think that there is extraordinary value that can be delivered at the front end, but I think one of the things that's very cool about low-code, no-code tools is how it sort of pushes down on the cost of sort of the main middle part of that. And then as a result, if you're really extraordinary at it, yeah, sure, you can create additional value there. If
We
you
also
are,
got a great comment from Daniel. Hi
Thank
guys,
you.
love to see the new show.
And we love to see you too, Daniel. I appreciate the support. And I think, and Dan and other people like in State Change, I think have seen this too, that like a lot of the table stake stuff is stuff that you can just do now much more easily and do at a fairly high level of quality. But I tend to agree with what you're saying. Like most decisions, or sorry, most companies, right, businesses, right, are predicated on having, and particularly technology companies are predicated on having some sort of intellectual property or some sort of asset, right, and that asset is almost always stored, right, back with the company, and then being delivered, spoon-fed, if you will, to the audience, right? And so the front end is like an edge, right, between these two nodes of the user or the customer and of the business, the vendor, and the trying to make a better edge that will improve things, right? But if you're trying to judge a winery, right, it's not going to be the bottle that you put it into. It's going to be how well you've been managing the grapes, and that's back at the vineyard. That's not at the customer's table.
Right. For example, also we got Johnny in here. Hey, Johnny. For example, Johnny has built an AI generator app, right? It wouldn't actually matter if he's going to build it in SwiftUI, if he's going to build it in Despia, if he's going to build it in WeWeb, because the core of his application, that is going to be the AI training, how he uses Replicate, how he stores the things in Xano, and then the experience around it, the front end stuff, that can just be delivered through any channel. And I actually built a little fun application yesterday in Lovable. I made a copy of CalAI in like 20 minutes with Xano. And I was like, okay, let me try Lovable, because Ray always said, you should try it. It's actually quite fun. And I was like, let's see what this is all about, right? So I tried Lovable. And I first started with her Supabase integration. And I was like, oh boy, I don't like this. And I was like, it's doing things, but I don't really know what it's doing. I don't really like that. I was like, I feel I lost control while doing this. And then I was like, okay, how about let me build this API in Xano, the backend with AI. So I got my API key environment variable. I got my API, I got it all set up. I understand the core of the business now, right? Of the core of the SaaS. And then let me copy that curl, put it into Lovable, and have it talk to that. And instantly, first generation, it was perfectly working. I gave it the curl and an example response. It built the application. I could run it on my phone. It was super fun. I made you can make a photo and it gives you the calories and the protein of things. And it built it first try, no prompt engineering needed. It was working. And I could monitor everything going on Xano. When I make this change on Xano, I didn't have to reprompt anything in Lovable. It just worked. So I think we'll an idea that I feel very comfortable with is having the front end maybe outsourced to AI and having the back end outsourced to Xano, because I do like how Xano structures it with, the visual aspect, that I can see those critical pieces of my business, especially with some of the new things that are coming that I can't talk about because there's an NDA. But Ray, you know what's coming, and this is exciting. So everybody who is wondering what exciting stuff is coming, it's really exciting. It's going to be very
sure. And the folks at Xano have announced for the last 6 months what a lot of the stuff that's coming. So like the
Okay.
the
I
net
don't
that
know
you
how
have.
much I can say, so I want to be very mindful because I don't want to share anything that is private because there are lots of things that that I've seen and heard, and I want to make sure that we're mindful of everyone's
I mean,
intellectual
Xano basically brought to the public attention their intent to make something called Xano Script, which is a DSL specifically for building Xano function stacks and describing how to go build infrastructure with it. Back in October at NCS, and then just a couple weeks ago.
I tried it today. It's awesome. It's awesome. I love it because I can, because now I can, I can see that code, so I can copy and paste things, and it's very nice.
There are things you can do more easily with code than you can do with the visual, and being able to go back and forth is a bit of a trick, and that's certainly the thing that they are working on right now.
It works.
And then and they announced a couple weeks ago, so you can also say that they're working on better support for things like MCP, and having alternatives to just the
And
REST.
their NPM stuff is amazing too. I was able to get WebAuthn working to have native passkeys in Xano. Finally.
Yes, there, and big shout out to Michael Westman, who's who's the engineer over there, who's working on their support for the JavaScript engine, and who's I think he's done a fantastic job, so far. I'm sure lots of little corner cases will get found, but it is fast. It works fairly smoothly. You're able to identify what node package you want. It seems to slide in.
I remember when we had to run this on Node.js to compile it down and get like 500,000 lines of JavaScript and put it in a Lambda function and just write return at the end.
Yeah, been there. Right. So like the ability to do that direct edit is and I think is far superior. I think makes Xano a lot more useful. I've actually been ripping out some of my Google Cloud Run functions that I've been using to be shimming in those kinds of problems, and then just sort of do it in line. In fact, I'm pretty sure this thing is like markedly faster than their previous Node.js implementation.
Oh yeah, it's lightning fast. And before that, it was you kind of like hit memory limits very fast. But now I tried working with files in the Lambda functions, and I never had my instance crash because sometimes when I was working with files, just my Xano server was down for like half an hour.
Yep. Yeah,
and we do lots of things with files and Despia, so I was like, this is great. I like what they're doing. I like the direction they're going because now we can do way more stuff, and I'm very satisfied with the pace that Xano is moving right now. I can, this is I think very rare for a no-code tool to innovate as much as they're innovating. I mean, I know you've been talking, with those about those things for years. Let's get NPM in there. But recently, I don't know what's happening to them. They're just shipping like crazy, and I do really appreciate that. There are lots of new things coming, lots of things that we always wanted. And I just like the way Xano approaches this in balancing innovation with a stable platform, right? They're shipping a lot of things, but I've never encountered where there was any issue, any bug, especially for something as critical as the backend. So I do like the idea of outsourcing, the backend parts to a provider that I trust, like Xano, and then maybe considering, whatever front end tool I want to use. Let it be AI, let it be visual, whatever. But that is what I learned. You want to have a backend provider you can trust that's actually doing work for you, like Xano, and it's just going to be you just get an own ability that you would have never had before. Even if you're using something like Lovable for the front end, right? Because you can just put your open API spec in there, and it's very nice. It's very nice. So I learned that the backend is the core most of the times, and it doesn't really matter what front-end tool you're using. People are always asking me what's the best front-end tool to use. Should I use WeWeb? Should I use Toggle? Should I use Lovable? And right now I'm at the point where I learned this, and I was like, it doesn't matter as long as you are very comfortable with the backend code. And most people, I think, especially in the age of vibe coding, are kind of like forgetting about the backend. They just focus on a pretty nice front end that looks like it was made by Vercel, and they lose that ownability that is so critical for their business, because that's what's going to make the difference between you and everybody else using AI.
Yep. I mean, the I think you make an interesting point about like which parts you outsource at what at what stage. You know, the I think on the front end is also a question like what is your superpower. So
Yeah,
people who are really good at design are going to find themselves using vibe coding a little bit less because they want more control over that design. And the upsetting thing for people who are in that position is that the part of the front end that the AI knows how to do is the design part. It knows how to go make some. I have literally used the prompt, make this look better. Actually, no, I didn't say that. I said make
I'm using the same one, but
and like it does it can introduce and to your point it uses it using fairly basic styling, right? Like it'll make it look like Vercel, it makes it look like Catalyst or Tailwind UI or whatever.
this is my prompt. I say, do this, make it look like Vercel. And
Yeah,
then when it gives it to me back, I'm going to say, Claude, more Vercel.
it's like just more cowbell, right? And but I think for those of us, for myself, right, where that kind of design and taste is not my strong suit, asking it to help with that is me using the AI and what the AI is really good for. What the AI is not good for, even on the front end, is handling workflow or managing state. So I actually find I'll do things like, and my preferred tool for like doing front end work is can be using Cursor or Windsurf, and I will like make the component or the hook or whatever that's going to be about managing a piece of data, and then it can make the UI that goes around it, right? So the part that it doesn't know how to do, I'm not exposed to. The part that it does know how to do really well, get to use more of that, and that gives me more leverage. I get to apply strength against weakness. And that's the core of good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been trying with some of those UI stuff. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a designing expert, but I do know how good UI should look, and I'm good at telling an AI you did a terrible job, or you did a good job at that. So I can go very far with a short prompt, and this is where I do appreciate AI as well. And it's also good at making some small JavaScript code when you like we gotta do some file stuff on the back end, and you're unsure how to do this with a PNG, and then you just go to AI, get some inspiration, and then it'll break somewhere in the middle, and then you just go around there and try to debug it. But it's actually really good at giving you ideas how to start approaching an issue, because a lot of the times you're going to look at the issue and you don't know what specifically the issue is and how to solve it. And then you just take a look and you go into a direction, and maybe you go into another direction. We've been doing this lots of times in state change, where we go into a direction and then we pivot and then we go back and then, oh, now we're there. And then at the end of the day, we're just moving faster and just going faster through those all those errors. And I don't think you're going to make more errors using AI. It's just you're going to make those errors faster, and that's why it looks like it's more.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. I think there's a really good thing about let's make more errors faster because then you get through them, right? And the key is to learn faster, right? And there's a little bit the AI is learning faster, but frankly, a lot of it's just us learning faster. The I haven't liked the term vibe coding because it creates the implication that you just sort of turn off your brain and go with the flow. But in fact, I think you really got to turn the brain on a lot more. I think that's something that was like subject to one of our calls like a month ago or something. And but I think those who do pay attention, man, there's so much you can get out of this, and so much it can accelerate your learning. I mean, I come out of a session where I've been working with this tool, and like the amount I've learned, my brain is hot because not only is the thing running fast, but I'm running fast to keep up with it. And when those things are happening, that's a pretty good place to be. Ooh, hey, look at that.
Yes, I just wanted to say, if you want to learn more about Zen and more about the backend, look at that. We even got a nice animation around there. But if you need some help from Ray, and you want to join his community, statechange.ai, I would highly suggest you, if you're building with Lovable, if you're building with Cursor, if you're building with WeWeb, if you're building with Whist, if you're building with Xano, if you are pushing the hardest parts of NoCode, I would highly suggest you to take a look at statechange.ai. I've learned everything from him. So if you want to be like me and do exciting stuff, and definitely check out his community, because if it wouldn't be for him, I would be right now still talking about how to use FinSuite attributes or something. And now I can write it myself. There you go.
Well, that's kind of you to say, but I think you would have been on that rocket ship trajectory no matter what, man.
I was faster thanks to you, right? Let's
Uh,
make mistakes.
I hope that's the case, and I think that's all any of us can do, right? Sort of figure out like what is someone's special talent, like help them move more in that direction.
Exactly.
And it has certainly been a joy to get to work with yours, But we talk a little bit about like this, front end versus back end part, but I
Yeah.
think when we're talking about these tools, right, and how they're going to accelerate us, there's an aspect of them as a vendor, right, as a product they're putting into the market. There's an aspect of them as a company, right, that's backing up that product, which is, I think, a significant aspect. That's where we get to talk more about the businessy part of our industry. But I think there's a third part too, and at the risk of going into lion's den, there's the question of the community that they build around themselves. And this is something that you've had a variety of experiences on, and you are, super thoughtful and very, very helpful in every circumstance that you go into. I've seen you be super helpful in state change. I've seen you be super helpful in like the discords you've been in. I've seen you be super helpful with, over on the WeWeb forum. And of course, you're doing that now on a first party basis over at NoCode ProCode. Now, not all these has had the same kind of positive outcomes for you, although your commitment to service has always been pretty high. But you, I think, are in a really unique position to speak to this issue of these no code communities, right? And the community as a support vector and what it means for working with a particular vendor. And I wonder if we could just get some words of wisdom about that without needing to talk about any like particular thing that's been in the news and go.
There's been too many particular things in the past
Yeah.
few weeks or months, years, but no, I think.
What lessons you're learning? Yeah.
No, I think there has been no community like state change, to be honest. And with NoCode ProCode, I'm trying to replicate the way you've been doing state change, because to be honest, I've been in multiple NoCode communities. I have never had a community that has been as good and as supportive as state change. Because with state change, you are empowered to learn. You're empowered to learn about things, and because the community is not owned by a specific tool, nobody is holding you back from going to the next level. When I joined State Change, I was doing Whist, and then I stopped doing Whist, and then Joe wanted to talk to you because of that. And State Change is not holding you back from going to the next level. And sometimes, if you learn, you understand. You start to understand more about some of the things that you're doing in a particular tool, in a particular way of developing, and then it just becomes not the right way of doing anymore because your knowledge is increasing. And the nice thing that I found with StageNet is nobody is holding you to any specific idea. Ray didn't say, why don't you stay with Wiz or whatever. That would have happened probably in the Wiz community if, they would have provided that. Or in WeWeb, someone would say, why don't you keep using WeWeb? Why do you want to go custom code? WeWeb can handle it. We got AI. Or same with Toddle. Someone would say, Toddle is made in Toddle. Why don't you go to the next step? Like, just stay with us. So I think company provider-based communities tend to hold you down because, of course, they're not going to make money if nobody will be using their tool. But with independent communities like State Change, also like mine, I'm not holding you on any specific tool as well, but like State Change, the emphasis is on learning new stuff, on getting better at what you do, and nobody is holding you to any particular ideology. And this is kind of like what I'm working on with NoCode ProCode a little bit more, because I want to bring WeWeb in there. I want to bring some other stuff in there. Toddle has been certainly great to build the base. We'll still talk about Toddle, but I do like the way Ray has approaching things, where there is no specific bias towards an idea of development, because not everybody will be fit for Toddle. Not everybody will be fit for Wiz. Not everybody will be fit for Despia. Right? They can think of a countless applications where Despia will be completely wrong for that person developing it. And I like the idea of not being on any particular side of the argument, but just empowering people to learn. And if you have an understanding how the browser works, you'll know how to work with WeWeb, you know how to work with Toddle, you know how to work with Wiz, you know how to do jQuery and Petite View in Webflow, because they all just follow the same principles with different syntax or different visual syntax. So I think the most important thing that you can do when you're looking for a community to empower you is to, of course, start joining the tool community if you want to get better at the tool. But there will be the time where you potentially have to let go of a particular way of thinking and just really look into how it is how you want to build the application and where you want to go. Because I found a lot of the times, surprisingly on the front end, no code is holding you back from going to the next step because you think you're no coder and you want to stay there. But I think the best thing that I have done is to, have Ray help me create a React app, because I remember I was doing Whist and Ray told me, let's create a React app. And I wanted to get React Flow. And he taught me like in 30 minutes how to build a React app. And we got it to work with Cursor. And that was like a year ago or something. And just something clicked. I was like, wow, I can just do this. I don't need Whist anymore.
You can just do things. And then like I think there's such an important idea in that 4-letter word, which is need, right? The when I'm increasingly trying out the term accelerated development. Not about no code, not about low code. Those are means to end. Not about AI. It's just accelerated development of ownable software, and those are always the two principles I talk about.
It sounds that trendy, but you can probably find a better name for it.
Yeah, well, that's you're right. The naming thing is not necessarily my long suit. But like speed's the North Star, right? What allows me to go faster? What allows me, and more importantly, what allows me to learn faster? And if I can do those things, then I will make a lot more progress in my career and with my objective or whatever in a much shorter period of time. And the thing is, like, people who are using Wiz because they think they couldn't build their thing without Wiz, if I can get them past that point of needing Wiz, they'll get more out of Wiz because they're able to live above it. Yeah, and certainly, I'm pretty sure when you got past that point of needing Wiz, you started making a lot more money from Wiz.
I felt, first of all, I made way more money, but I also felt a relief because I didn't, like, it's such a big thing. If you're like, I don't need this anymore, I can use it, it's optional. Right. But there is nothing more holding you back, I think, from making true progress than being dependent on a specific tool. And then, when that tool doesn't meet your expectations, or they stop shipping updates or whatever, your expectations get, crushed because you initially needed that tool. So I think the best you can do for yourself and for the company that's building the tool is not needing it. Because if you don't need it, you're not at their mercy if they screw something up. If they, make a bunch of updates and the whole editor gets buggy, and then you're like, shit, what do? I can't ship my update out on time. I'm speaking here out of experience, by the way. And then you got to, reschedule your product launch for your startup or for your new version of your product that like about 300 people have been waiting on. And you got to send a few more emails out to tell people we're sorry, but, the editor is buggy. So, when you need something, you always hold back by something. So it's a relief to know that when you recognize that you start needing less to be a Wiz developer, a Toddle developer, and you can just be a developer. And actually, the past marketing director from Toddle, he said me something. He told me something very great. I think about half a year ago. He said, you know what? Our philosophy at Toddle is we don't want you to be a Toddle developer. We don't want you to be a React developer. We want you to be a developer. And I want to make sure that Toddle is the right tool for developers. And I like that. I like that passion. I like that enthusiasm about it. And that was where I said, you know what? I should give that thing a try. It looks terrible, but let me try it out. Because back then it looked completely different. And I thought it was like a copy of Bubble because it sounded similar. But I think that is something that is very important to note. You're not a Wiz developer. You're not a Bubble developer. You're not a WeWeb developer. You're not a Toddle developer. Cut out the brand name out of your job title. You're a developer. And then if you go deeper, you're a problem solver. You don't need to know how to code to be a problem solver. It's good enough if you know the solution and ask AI to turn that solution into code. That's sufficient. But I think you have to be very good at solving problems. And most people that are on those no-code communities are marketing people. They are business people, right? And they are very good at solving problems in their domain. And they're using no-code to, as you said, accelerate their development and turn their, maybe right now, mechanical processes to solve a particular problem into something that can run autonomously, so they can turn their service business into a software business, right? And this is where we see most of those no code users come. They're not agencies, right? And I think that's the value that no code provides. But I think all of those no code tools have been doing a terrible job in actually talking to those people, because I think the moment a no code tool gets bigger and bigger and bigger, all the agencies jump on top of it. And it's kind of like when it just falls apart, when people who are creative go into there and then they end up hiring an agency and stop the learning process because they want to get it out there fast. I think no-code tools should be providing more first-hand education, better education, to make sure that people that have the idea can build it themselves. Because even if you got the money to go and pay 20,000 to a developer or 50,000 for a developer, it won't be as good as if you're going to build it yourself. And I think the original promise of no-code was, hey, you're a lawyer, you can build your law SaaS app yourself. You don't have to pay a developer and make dozens of legal mistakes and get a big lawsuit, right? You can do this yourself, because you can, while you're building it, you can get your knowledge, you can get your experience, you can get yourself into the software. That is what gets me truly excited about visual development, about no-code. That's what I've been doing, and I want to teach it. That's why I do what I do on my YouTube channel. But I think the crucial part of that we're seeing is more and more people want to do this. And this is why lots of people go with vibe coding, because they say, I have this idea. I saw one guy on Twitter, he was a doctor, and he built an application for his patients using Lovable. And he put all his knowledge of being a doctor and working with patients for his clinic into there, so his patients could do the app, build the app, and reserve their spots. And they kind of like have something like One Medical, but only for that practice. And he's helping and he's solving real problems, and he knows the problem himself the best. If he's going to hire someone overseas, or even someone who's down the street, they're not going to know his problem like he does. So my emphasis was always on making sure that I can help people and I can teach people with my videos how they can do it themselves. I don't want you to go to an agency. I want you to do it yourself, because you'll never be happy with what someone else is doing with your idea.
I think that
happens with State Change as well, because you got lots of founders in there building stuff. They're doing exciting stuff, and everybody. Where's the QR code? There you go. Join State Change.
I certainly appreciate those kind of words. I think that there is a. I thought you made a really interesting point, earlier on in there, where you're talking about how, you're not a a Lovable dev, you're not a WeWeb dev, you're not a whatever, and I think there are evolutions to this, right? Because your point is, I think correctly, is that initially you're a business person, right? And then you're looking to solve a problem. You have this intuition you can solve a problem, and you pick up a tool to go solve that problem. And you're going to probably develop some parochial, experience and expertise in that tool for solving your particular problem. And so they see themselves like, oh, I need this tool in order to solve that problem. One of the most beautiful things I see in State Change is when they break free of the idea that they had come in with. Like, they had been struggling to make it work using X, and then they use Y, or they use X with a sprinkling of Y, so that they're not having to do the thing that X doesn't do well, or whatever. And that idea of like, you're bigger than the game is a freeing idea. I think it's a necessary part of the journey, right? People need to try things and then discover they can. They need to try things so they can learn, so they can elevate. After they've elevated, they discover they've elevated, and that's the releasing point. And now you're in that cycle that can be really, really powerful and be the kind that you just described. And I think the challenge is, which is, you're exactly right, is an educational challenge. It's also a permission challenge. People need to have permission to try.
I'm still there. I just felt it very motivational what you're talking about, so I wanted to give you the full screen.
Yeah, so people should have permission, should feel the permission to try. I think that's part of what you and I need to do is like we need to go and give people the idea they are able to go try new things, to go that they can make the software happen, and they should go spend a bit of time on it, and they will make a lot of progress. And they can make a lot of progress using vibe code tools. They can make progress using visual development. I don't care. If the idea is like if you can just learn that the machine will respond to you, that you are a smart person, you can make all those things go, and then take it up a level. And then you're initially the instinct is to think, oh, that must be the tool. And people think that tool is really amazing. But then there's that level above. And that level above is you can do this. You can learn. You can be more than what you were yesterday. And people who thought that they had stopped learning a few years ago when they became senior in their professions now are introducing this new level of learning that allows them to become far more than what they were. And when people get through that breakthrough, those are the moments that like make my day. And that's why I do state change.
Yeah, and this is why we have this talk, and I think we're both very passionate about that. And yeah, I completely agree. You have to be less dependent, because I think when you have this idea and you build it in Toddle, you think, I couldn't have done it without Toddle. It's just, but that's not true. You could have done it. It would be very painful. You would have had countless sleepless nights. You would have screamed at the AI and started hallucinating about it after the AI stopped hallucinating, maybe.
Yep.
But you could have done it. It's just that Toddle was back then the easiest way, or Wiz was back then the easiest way. Mm-hmm. But just because you've always done it like this doesn't mean you can change as your requirements change, right?
Yeah.
And I think we need to stop having hard feelings about the tool, because we're not like the tool is not. We're not like in a, we're not marrying the tool. We're not like, like you're not going to marry Andreas if you use Toddle, and you're not going to marry Joe if you use Whist, right? So you don't have to be tied to a tool, or you're not marrying, Raf if you, use WeWeb. But we have to take a look at what tool. It's like a car. What tool can help us facilitate going to the point that we want to go, and then we'll use that to that extent that it helps us. And if it stops helping us, we'll just stop using it, and we'll go to something that helps us do that, right? And that's what you talk about with shopper's mindset as well in state change.
That's true. That is true.
So we do have some comments. We got one from Daniel. Ray, I'd love to hear your take on the limitations of Xano. When do you think it makes sense to move on to another backend? And could you share some example scenarios?
Yeah, sure. So, Xano is, you think of Xano really as a collection of things, I think is a better mental model for it. And then you replace parts of it as appropriate. So Xano has a backend, so Xano is a virtual machine, right? You buy a virtual machine. You can get that machine upgrade. Basically, you own your own virtual machine. It's like a DigitalOcean droplet that way. It can be quite powerful, but it's sort of bounded the same way the laptop in front of you right now is bounded. Right. This is in contrast to being a serverless architecture, which is what, say, BuildShip uses, right? Where you can go crunch all you want, they'll make more because it just sort of spreads out across a bunch of machines. So that's but within that box, they provide you with a bunch of stuff, and that can be quite appealing. Because you get to use as much inside that as you want. It has a database inside. It has a PostgreSQL database. A transactional database is very good for, keeping track of transactions. It has this function stack that's pretty good, that can handle a decent load of processing, but finite, both because there's an overhead associated with being a no-code system, and the fact that it's sitting inside this box can't really go out further than that box does. It has an authentication system that sort of provides on a first-party basis that's pretty convenient to use, and takes care of things as table stakes level. And it has a few other, sort of features along the way. But what I find is that people discover that there are going to be challenges working with Xano. So one kind of challenge people can run into is they discover they don't really need a transactional database. They need a data warehouse. So super common thing that I see is I'm copying all this data from some other data source. This is called a backend for front end pattern. Right, that's what an engineer would call it. And the idea is that you have data that's coming from some other store, and you're like mirroring it or whatever inside your Xano database, and then you want to go serve it up. Well, I gotta tell you, man, once you start like throwing a lot of data in that thing, it just cries because you're making so many changes. In a transactional database, every transaction creates load, and you're running lots of transactions to keep the data in sync. It really starts to grind to a halt. And so, like the one of those common things I see for like businesses that are scaling is like, I have this thing in the database, it's just crying out. What do I do about it? Now, this isn't about like running your business. This is about being that data mirror, right? That I'm talking about. Like, this is what we call an OLE.
Let's say you're going to make a database to query public records. And instead of, having an API to query public records, do you think it's a great idea because that API is like, I don't know, 5 cents every time you call it? You're just going to call that API every day and get all the public records from the United States of America, about 300 million records, and you're going to put them in your Xano database, and then you're going to do a get record in there. And your Xano is probably going to light fire somewhere in their warehouse.
And it's going to have a bad day. So that would be an example. That's what we call a data warehousing pattern. And in and when you're starting to use Xano as a data warehouse, when it's small, it's fine. Everything when it's small is fine. But when it gets large and starts to scale, that's when you're saying, oh, this is the wrong tool for the job. And now you want to use something like, say, Google BigQuery, which is one of the best data warehouse systems on the planet, super cheap. And now what you want to do is use the other bits of Xano to go route data over to Google BigQuery instead of using it inside your Xano transactional database. It's a little bit less convenient. You have to do a little bit more work to make those things happen.
But you can do like a function for that.
You make some additional custom functions. Yeah, it's a data work, and it works. It works really well. But it takes that additional bit of work. And that'd be an example like taking part of Xano and moving it out. Another super common example is a search engine. Xano, for whatever reason, decided to introduce support for vector databases. And I say for whatever reason because a vector database, right? The way you use it, like for a semantic search in AI, violates the rule of indexes in databases. Because the idea behind an index is like if you get like a textbook out, right? Like look at all these hundreds and hundreds of pages that are sort of stuff, right? Then the last 20 pages of it are the index, right? And that's how it usually works in a major database. Is like the index is much smaller than the actual data set. In a vector database, that's not true. It's the reverse. The database is actually much, much, much bigger than the actual underlying data. And that's the reason why vector databases work so well, is because they're so big. As a result, they have to be stored in memory. And that is really hard to work with. So that would be an example of if someone's trying to use Xano as like a micro search engine, go take that data out of your Xano or mirror it or whatever and put it up into a good search engine like Llama Index, like Weaviate, like Vectara or something, right? Something that does vector searching as a first-class tool, and then use those, right? And then be calling that from the rest of Xano. That's an example of like taking part of Xano and moving it out. And then the function stack might be the wrong tool for that.
That's going to be expensive. You may be also able to use something like a Golia, but that will be like $200 a month. So
could be. Yeah. I mean, these tools have different prices and they're not free. And the reason they're not free is because they take up so much memory. And memory is the most valuable resource in all those things. And like you can go on with like other things. And I was very tempted a second ago to like start talking about like the fact that it's server instance space versus serverless. And there can be use cases where you'd really rather it was more serverless, but then there are tools you can bring to bear to replace just those parts. And that's what I mean by sprinkling the little bits so that the X you're working in is no longer confining you, because X plus Y can drive a whole lot more. And that's the mental model that I would wish people watching today to take away from this is like, wait, the tool's not doing the job for you. You don't have to throw it out necessarily. You might, but it might not even be that bad to throw it out. But but you can often add something else in, and it'll be like a bomb. And now all of a sudden you're using this for what's really good for, using everything for what's really good for, and the whole thing has so much more room to grow.
Right. And that's what normal development does too. You're not doing everything in Python, right? So why should you do everything in Xano?
Right. Or even if you're doing everything in
Python. There are people building their front end in Python, to be fair, but
yes. HTMX is a thing, Streamlit is a thing, particularly in the world of AI-driven stuff, partially because people like to work in in Python because that's what they've been building in. But even Python has its generation of like low-code tools. I mean, Jupyter Notebooks are a good example of this. And and like mixing this stuff up to like just use the best tool for the job based on where you are. That's why we talk about shopper's mindset, right? Yeah. What's the state of the art of the tooling? What's your job to be done? And where are you in your journey? And that combination of those three things, that drives that drives the best decisions, right, for how to be getting the most out of what you need today. And as all three of those things change, the job can be changing, you can be changing, the tools can be changing. That can change what you want to build with.
Yeah. We also have another question. I think that's going to be part of that. Also from Dan, and also your take on WeWeb versus Total. What's your take on it? I've talked about my take earlier on that.
Right. I think the most interesting way to look at WeWeb versus Toddle is the question of deployability. Toddle is Toddle has more in common with Wiz in terms of being a system that is running running the back end for your front end for you, right? And they say they're going to do some open source stuff, so you might be able to self-host that, but it's a lot more work, right? Contrast that with what WeWeb does. WeWeb isn't a front end hosting system. WeWeb is a code generator. WeWeb creates Vue.js code, which Vue.js is a framework for building front ends using JavaScript, which means you get a bunch of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as your output, and you can host it anywhere. You can host it on Netlify, you can host it on Vercel, you can host it on Cloudflare. You can go send it to wherever you want to work with it. And so as a result, they don't provide you with quite as much help in like making something work well for like, search engine optimization or any of that stuff. But it's much easier to pick up that which you made in WeWeb and put it in the host of your choice. So in general, if you like the way Wiz or Toddle handles their hosting, I think there's a good story to be said. They take care of that problem for you. If you want more control over that, which I think as we start making more businesses, we do care about that story. I think WeWeb has a superior story for it. And then after that, it's like, how much do you like the build experience of the tool? And that's going to be a matter of those same three things. Like, what's your taste, right? What do you like to build with? What's the story on their tools today? And both Toddle and WeWeb are changing a lot. Toddle has a sort of anti-AI story, but it has an AI assistant, which is very interesting to work with, has different philosophy. And the folks over at WeWeb are changing every day in terms of changing up their functionality, and they've got some really good people working on it. And I love the fact that you've got this competition, because it just means it's going to be better experience for people who are building with those things. But I think if you're trying to figure out like which of those two, what will be dispositive about those two things, I think it's a question of who do you want to manage your hosting, and are you looking for a system to dial into the way that you dial into, say, Xano, right, for managing your stuff, or are you looking for something to generate code for you? And that's really what WeWeb provides.
I also think if you're going to raise money, serious amounts of money, and you're going to go to investors and you're going to tell them, you know what, we built this in this no-code tool, and someone asks, okay, who owns the IP, and where you're hosting with, and you have to explain them, we're using something where it's hosted with someone else and we can't really use it because nobody's using that code. I think you're going to have an easier game in raising capital if you can tell investors we have built this in Vue.js.
Maybe
there's an operability fact to it, but I mean, Toddle is going open source, so we'll see how that changes.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think the other thing is we come back to what you started with today, and hey, you just looped it all the way around. Nicely done there. Because your secret sauce is not in your front end, right?
Yeah.
It is a means to the end. So like when you are talking to the venture capitalist, when you're trying to figure out like what's at the core of my business, it's not going to be how my front end app got built, whether it be with Lovable or be with using WeWeb or using something else.
That would be more of a Bubble problem when you have everything in one platform.
Well, yeah, but Bubble's an interesting story too. But I actually recently worked with a or spoke at least. I wasn't involved in this engagement, but they did it in like 2 weeks. They went from being built on Bubble to being built on a Python backend and a React front end, and it took them about 2 weeks. And they did it because they were using AI assisted coding. They were using Cursor and like just sort of flying through that stuff. Because I think a lot of what you do the first time around is you're not just figuring out how to build, you're also figuring out what to build. And if you have learned that lesson along the way, then your second round can go much faster, because the how to build it can actually, a lot of that be tooled away if you know where you're going. The first part's sort of all that exploratory part. And like you say, that's about the learning, that's about turning the wheel.
Yeah, for example, it took me 1 year to build the front end for Despin. I rebuilt it in 14 days in total. Not because Tuttle is so good, it's because I already made all the mistakes in Whist. It's like I did less than Tuttle. I mean, Tuttle is a great tool, so I'm not trying to push it down. I think it would probably take me 3 months to do it somewhere else. It does a lot of the things for you. But this critical difference when you hear, oh, we built our first version in whatever, and we'll rebuild this in Whist in so much faster. It's not because actually Whist or Toddle or Bubble or whatever or Cursor is that good. It's because they already made all the mistakes before, so they don't have to make them again. And now they're way smarter than they were initially.
That's good. Right. Okay, well, we are heading towards the end of our hour here, Yassine. Can I ask you, what's going to be true when we talk and we go live 2 weeks from today that's not true right now?
Oh, I got something. 1 second. Oh, my trackpad just died. Okay, 1 second. Something that is right now not true is, right now Despia version 3 is not on the market yet, but in 2 weeks, Despia version 3 will be on the market with way more functionalities.
Excellent.
I love those advertisements I can put on live streams. They're great.
They are great. And you know what we should do? Yassine, can we just put up a QR for the NoCode Pro Code so when people are checking out the video, they're able to see that too?
Sure, yes. So if you're working with NoCode and front end is particularly important for you, meaning you're building a mobile app or you're building something that needs to have a great experience, we are helping you on there with daily office hours. It's the same principle, essentially, like Rated. I remember when I started, I was like, Ray, I need your blessing on this because I'm about to copy what you're doing. So this is kind of like where we focus on more of the front end, but we'll still do the back end and Zen and all that kind of stuff. But it's more about, getting your startup out there and giving you support, also a little bit beyond just, solving the problem, but also, let's argue with Apple and all that kind of stuff to get it on the App Store and all those kinds of things. We do all that exciting stuff in there.
Yep, and App Store is its own kind of fun, exciting tale to tell. All right, well, I think that brings us in for a landing. And thank you. Those are awesome questions.
Wonderful. Anything else you want to talk about? Any final words? You are the guest, so I'm going to give you the honor.
Oh my goodness! I think the world heard plenty of words from me today. So let me just too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time as well. We'll see each other, and all of you in 2 weeks.